Judy, you and your staff, when you guys are ready, I give you another 2 minutes to settle down.
The minister has tendered an apology to you.
Who?
Minister.
Yeah. She sent me a text message. Thank you. Thank you, Gillian. You're here at least. Yeah. Okay, I think let's make a start. It's a lovely morning today in Cape Town. A warm word of welcome to all the members online as well, with me here in the chamber, all the officials, Dr. McDonald, you and your staff. But let me give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. I'm Dan Plato, chairperson of the Standing Committee, and all the members. Thank you. Christopher.
Good morning, officials. Good morning, everybody online. My name is Christopher Fry. I'm a member of this committee.
Good morning. I'm Gillian Oswald.
Thank you, members online. I've seen Member Baku. Member Baku, are you with us? No. I know with load shedding, we many at times facing some technical glitches, technical problems. But if there's such a problem, honourable members online, please let us know. Pop me a WhatsApp message or a SMS just to alert us that you're experiencing problems that we know. But yes.
I'm member Baku Force.
Honourable Baku, thank you. Thank you so much. And down here with me, the staff, Honourable HOD, please.
Good morning, Honourable Chairperson and Honourable Members. I'm Robert McDonald, Head of Social Development in the Western Cape.
Morning, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members. Charles Jordan, Chief Director, Children, Families and Vulnerable Groups. Thank you.
Good morning, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members. I'm Najwa Talib and I'm the Programme Manager for Foster Care, Provincial DSD.
Honourable Members, Honourable Chair, Thembekile Kwagwini, currently Acting Director of Children and Families within the Department of Social Development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let me just make another quick announcement before we get into business. I think we only receive, Nomonde, one apology. That is from Member Kasim.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you so much. That's us. But if it is, let us know. Phone in so that we know who is online. We would love to know. Let us get immediately into business. This is emanating from questions asked from previous sessions and also oversight visits we had to many towns and ECDs and those places and investigate as part of our oversight responsibilities. And today we're going to talk about foster care issues, funding and that sort of thing. How they operate and so on. Last night already I scanned the presentation and each and every one of you must have a presentation on your desk. Honourable Gillian and Fry, I think you have it on your system. I'm not sure about. Okay, there it is. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask the department, I don't want to rush the session, but it's a crampy kind of a day with many events. By 12, I need to be out of here. because I think the two of us also need to drive to PAL for another oversight visit, also to some ECDs and that sort of thing. We're going with Education, Department of Education. So if we need to finish on the dot all before 12, that you just be aware of that, that we are stick to the point, stick to the issues so that we can get nicely through the program. Okay, Honourable HOD, all yours to start. My other apologies, sometimes I don't write things down. Your minister, our minister, also did table her apology. I need to note that as well. Thank you. HOD, you may go.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairperson. I will hand over to the team. I think they have prepared a fairly in-depth presentation, so we should probably get started on it. Thank you very much to Najwa and the team for preparing that.
Thank you, HOD. Thank you, CD. Honourable Chair, honourable members. Basically, the presentation will focus on the management matters, and I've prepared just a contents page just to indicate the areas that we will cover. So we will cover the legislative framework, policy procedures, which is also encapsulated in our canalisation standard operating procedure, which is our working document for foster care. We'll cover foster care norms and standards, also cluster foster care norms and standards, the foster care plan of action for the implementation of the amendments of the Children's Act 38 of 2005. We will also focus on our baseline foster care children, how many children we have in the foster care system at present. Briefly just on our human resources, our foster care monitoring tool management system, as well as our Section 125 that gives us access to the National Child Protection Register. We will also touch on the challenges as well as the mitigating factors, and then we will also focus on the designated child protection organizations and a bit of the funding. So just to start off with the legislative framework, the Western Cape DSD uses our legislative framework, which is our Children's Act of 38 of 2005. And 4 or 5 years ago, we went full on the implementation of the Children's Act by all role players in the foster care management chain. So all our court orders go to the court for the extension of our short-term foster care as well as our long-term foster care orders. And all other notices are issued by our canalisation services for DSD. I'll also further down just explain the role of the canalisation units that we have in DSD. So our standard operating procedure is aligned with the Children's Act, which guides our foster care social workers on the implementation to standardise foster care services in the province. So we have the process that is monitored and guided by the canalisation SOP. We have canalisation officers in all our service delivery areas, and all our canalisation officers have appointed canalisation letters that allows them, through the delegation of our head of department, Dr. Robert MacDonald, to where he gives those powers over to our canalisation officers in order to issue these written notices in terms of foster care processes. That is, if a child needs to be transferred or if a foster placement breaks down. So there are various processes that needs to be followed by our foster care social workers, and those notices are issued by our canalisation officers. So to move over, and that is just the framework of our legislative processes and the canalisation SOP that guides us in the management of foster care. Then our norms and standards, I'll go over to the norms and standards, and I'm just going to briefly touch, I've separated them just for the purpose of the presentation, but I'll speak to them just integratively. So the first norm and standard is that a child has a right to live in a family, and hence we as the department, we ensure that those children that comes into the care system have a family that we can place that child with. And normally we go through an entire screening process where we recruit, we screen, we train our foster parents, our safety parents, and we try as best as possible to match the children according to their culture, religion, race of their family of origin as far as possible. That sometimes is a challenge, and the shortage of foster care placements is a very scarce resource because we have such a huge turnover of children coming, or high amount of children coming into the care system on a weekly basis, that it's very difficult to uphold, you know, the amount of foster parents on our database. Then children also have the right to participate in decisions, so they can participate in decisions that are made depending on their age, the maturity, and all those aspects plays a role into a child making a decision along with the social worker. And also the social worker have the obligation to inform the parents of decisions that are being made. And when children are younger, we will normally ask their views directly, and when they're older, they also have the option to write down their views. And these views are normally sought when we extend foster care orders. Also with the initial placement, children can participate in decision making. Also, children have the right to be placed with suitable foster parents. Like I've touched on previously, foster parents are recruited, screened and trained, and they are to be appropriately matched. And then if they are not matched and they're waiting for placement, they go on a database. All children are also entitled to a comprehensive investigation where we assess and we evaluate the circumstances of the child and the family before a decision is made for that child to enter the foster care system or the alternative care system initially. The investigation and the circumstances of the child is being investigated, and we get 90 days to do that investigation, and a comprehensive report will then have to be, from the date when the matter was reported, the comprehensive report will then get submitted to court, and a foster care order or placement is finalized through a court process. And the court will then make a final decision based on the social worker's recommendation in that report. All children in foster care must have certain plans in place. So at the time of finalization, social workers will compile what we call a permanency plan. And when children already then gets placed into the foster care system, then there's certain periods of time where we get, within certain timescales, where we get to actually compile a foster care plan for the child as well as an individual care plan. And the permanency plan per se is where we need to focus as to why the child cannot return and what services need to be provided in order for that child eventually to be reunited with their family of origin. Also, all foster parents, moving over to the foster parent side now, so all foster parents must receive ongoing support and capacity building, and that is what we provide to our carers. There are support groups running through an external source. We have an organization that renders support groups for our foster parents, it's Agape, and we also have our social workers getting training from this specific service provider. Then we also have Iris House. So there are various organizations that also outsource these type of support that we provide to our foster parents, as well as our social workers in DCPOs, as well as own services also provides training and support groups to our foster parents as far as possible. Children also in foster care has the right to financial, educational, medical support from the states, and that is where the foster child grant comes in via SASSA, so where they can access that grant. Also, children in foster care are exempted from paying school fees in government schools, and they also have the right to access medical care via government community health services, healthcare services. Then children also have the right to interventions that are appropriate for their age, maturity, and developmental needs, and those are all the aspects that are covered in the foster care plan as well as the individual care plan of children. and that is normally compiled by the foster care social worker when they're already in foster care. A child may be transferred also regionally, provincially, and discharged, and there are certain written notices that we refer to right in the beginning that canalisation officers, after screening such an application, which means that the social worker must compile a report in whatever process they require from canalisation services. The report is reviewed, the application, whether it's a transfer application or an emergency removal or discharge from alternative care, then those applications are submitted to our canalisation services. Our canalisation officers will then review the report and then issue the notice upon approval of the content of the application. Then children also without parents have the right to be permanently placed. And I think our amendment also covers this aspect where we want children without parents, the orphan child, the abandoned child, to be considered for adoption. And this depends on the foster parent or the safety parent lodging an application, but there is a process, also an adoption process on its own. But when it comes to foster care per se, foster parents have the right to adopt a child that is placed in their care. And that also has to go through lodging an application. The responsibilities and rights of foster parents must also be maintained as set out in the Children's Act. And these rights and responsibilities are normally inclusive in the foster care plan, so that our foster parents are aware of their rights, but also equally of their responsibilities towards foster children, because we do find that sometimes children are still being left unsupervised, despite contracting with our foster parents. For some or other reason, the placement breaks down. And it's that responsibility that we accept responsibility when a placement breaks down, but it's about the communication with the social worker to liaise a smooth transfer for that child and not to be left at certain places like a police station or just left at the DSD offices. That still happens. And we try our very best. So hence we try and include these responsibilities that our foster parents also have towards our children in foster care, that be emphasized. Children must also live in an environment that is safe and healthy and well maintained, that meets their basic needs in terms of their privacy, their safety, and their well-being. And therefore, the department follows the guidelines as set out in Regulation 57 of the Children's Act, where we have a prescribed form, but also a process. So social workers will then assess and screen our foster parents, and the screening report goes to our canalisation officers, and upon approval, they will issue a Form 39. And the Form 39 is accompanied with the Children's Court Inquiry report that goes to court when a child is placed in foster care. So coming back to the actual placement of the child, it must be healthy, it must be hygienic, and it must be safe. When we talk about safety, we're inclusive of the care, the nutrition, the educational needs, the medical needs, the sleeping arrangement of that child. All those aspects are being looked at if that particular carer is able to meet the needs of that particular child, particularly when we look at a child with special needs. So that's where the Form 39 is coming into play. Children are also entitled to remain in alternative care at the end of each year when such a child reaches the age of 18, and social workers have then that opportunity to apply for that extension 3 months prior to the child turning 18, and via HOD through canalisation services may extend such an order or notice until the child turns 21 years of age. But that application has to come to canalisation services annually, and the grant must be applied for annually to ensure that the young person still is in formal education or is doing some or other training or course that allows them to still access the foster child grant up until the age of 21. And that process is normally facilitated through our SASSA. So the application then goes to SASSA for the extension of the grant annually between January and March of each year. Then children have the right to be reunited with their families, so rendering reunification services is also part of our foster care plan. Sometimes social workers find it very difficult to get to this end of the work because we are very bogged down to monitor and to extend foster care orders due to the huge statutory demand to extend a foster care order for children every 2 years. And when we come to the database, I'll explain a little bit more about that. Then reunification plan, yes, when a child exits the foster care system, a reunification plan is normally presented also to our canalization officer or to the court. There are various processes that a social worker can follow in order for a child to exit the alternative care system, either through court or canalization services. Okay, now let's just moving over to our cluster foster care norms and standards. In Chapter 12 of the Children's Act, the definition of cluster foster care refers to the reception of children in foster care in accordance with a cluster foster care scheme registered by the Department of Social Development, by the head of Department of Social Development. And only organizations based in the Western Cape would be considered for such applications, and also organizations that are registered as an NPO and that have their NPO number at hand. So with cluster foster care schemes, they must have 2 registrations. It must be the NPO registration, and they must also be designated and registered by the Department of Social Development. To apply for a cluster foster care scheme, they must have a minimum of 2 houses within the scheme. Some of our schemes are minimum of 2 up to quite a lot of houses, up to 10, 20 houses. Each house may only accommodate 6 children per house, and that is the norm. If we do extend beyond 6, then we will apply Section 185, which means that we have either have to go to court, or it must be a sibling group that is lastly placed that allows that house to go over to 7 children in any particular house. Coming to the recruitment, screening, vetting, and training of our foster carers, like we refer to them as active members at present in the Children's Act, but the wording will also has now changed with the amendments of the Children's Act. We refer to our foster parents as active parents when they are carers that cares for children in cluster foster care schemes. So all persons caring for children in cluster foster care schemes must be fit and proper, as the Act refers them to. And that means they must be physically, mentally, and psychologically sound to care and provide protection to our children in the schemes. All persons that works with children in the schemes must be checked against the National Child Protection Register in terms of Form 29 and Form 30. Since the delegation of Section 125 from National DSD, we are able to access the National Child Protection Register, so that has been a lot easier now for us to quickly just run a check to check if persons are fit and have not committed a crime against a child, or that their name does not appear on Part B of the National Child Protection Register. So persons convicted of murder, attempted murder, rape, indecent assault, or assault with the intent to do grievous bodily harm are unfit to work with children. Then the rights of children in cluster foster care schemes, that all schemes must uphold the rights of our children. A file must be kept at the management home, which means it's the head office of the scheme, as well as at each house of every house within the scheme, containing certain very pertinent documentation. And that is the child's valid court order, and the court order must be in the name of the scheme and not of the foster parent. And the reason for this is because as foster parents in the past, we've had a challenge where foster parents would then not be happy with the management of the scheme, and then they want to leave with our children. So that has changed. So the name of the scheme will now go on the court order that allows the scheme to protect that child in the event the carer wishes to leave the scheme. Must be a birth certificate or ID document on the file, the health records of the child, and then the responsibility for the care and protection is given to the foster parent, the active member, the carer, the caregiver of that scheme will provide the day-to-day care of the child. In all our schemes, we have a social worker, a funded social worker that actually monitors compliance and also monitors the care and protection of our children within the schemes. And that has been going very, very well. The amounts of concerns have reduced significantly. So social workers are in the regions and DCPOs, they are very pleased with the services rendered in cluster foster care schemes, and purely our social workers are also in-house to monitor the care and protection of our children within the schemes. Then also cluster foster care services must include but are not limited to render the following services. They must advocate for the protection of children's rights. They must also ensure services, programs that they have with the children within the schemes, counseling, psychosocial counseling skills, that the social workers have to offer those services to the children. They must ensure children are attending school so that their educational needs are met, health needs, mental health services, cultural and religious services, as well as services for children with special needs, inclusive of children with chronic illnesses or disability. We have 2 of our schemes that actually render such a service. Then also the different plans that we have for children, and I've briefly touched on it earlier in the presentation. It's the permanency plan upon admission of a child into the scheme. So they will come with their court order, and they will also come with all their relevant documentation, but also they will come with a permanency plan. And the permanency plan will then get assessed 2 months after placement, and then every 6 months to annually we will review the plan. The foster care plan will then feed into that the permanency plan, as well as the IDP of the child gets reviewed every 6 months. By the social worker within the scheme plays a very important role in this, because they will assist and support the designated social worker with these plans. So they will facilitate it and they will assist to ensure that the plans are developed, that they are assessed and they are evaluated regularly, and that they are available for our designated social worker. So this goes hand in hand. This is work that is done hand in hand with our designated social workers. Social children within the schemes also transfer. So hence, when children are placed, the court order is in the name of the scheme. However, the address of that particular house must appear on the court order, so that children are not allowed to just move across within the scheme. So they can't just say, okay, this carer is finding it difficult to manage this child. Oops, this week we put the child there with mum A, or next week mum B. No, that can't happen within the schemes. So children are placed at a certain house within the scheme to prevent children just from being moved around within the scheme. And that we have also a very specific process that we follow in terms of the legislative framework, and that is done via our canalization services, where the social workers submit a transfer report, and the report, after the report has been approved, a transfer notice is being issued to the social worker that will then allow the child to move from one house to another house within the scheme. Then also social worker, and I've touched on this as well, that social workers, for every 35 children, there must be a social worker within the scheme, and all registered and designated cluster foster care schemes have a funded social worker that really plays a significant role. Then funding, social workers, a child in a cluster foster care scheme have the right to financial support, and then also the payment of the foster child grant is then managed by the NPO and not by the carer. Once again, when the carer leaves, they are not allowed to move with the grant. The grant is then managed by the scheme. It's also paid via SASSA to the scheme. So that processes are already in place. Children in the alternative care system are also exempted from paying school fees as well as medical fees when they are in foster care or cluster foster care services. All cluster foster care schemes must adhere to the operational norms and standards for cluster foster care. We have our forum meetings where we meet with our clusters and we keep them abreast, and we also monitor and we ensure that compliance is adhered to in terms of the legislative framework. They'll also submit quarterly reports of all children in cluster foster care schemes where they submit registers of these children, and our schemes who are funded, they also adhere to the funding processes. So they submit they have TPAs in place for those social workers, and they adhere to all the funding standard operating procedures and funding processes with regards to the maintenance of those transfer payment agreements. And all cluster foster care schemes also submit an annual report of the organization of the NPO annually. So that knocks it about on the head for cluster foster care. Shall we proceed?
Can we move on?
Okay, so the Provincial Action Plan to implement the amendments of the Children's Act, there are various clauses that we have already implemented in the Western Cape prior to the amendment of the Children's Act. And with the first one, which is a very it has its own gaps, it has its benefits, but it also has certain gaps that we have identified so far in terms of the implementation of the CSG top-up grant, is the child support top-up grant. And so children who are orphaned or children at the head or in a child-headed household, or children who are in the care of relatives, are able to access this grant. And so what the department have put in place thus far, we have actually got some working understanding between ourselves and SASSA, that a list of these applications then comes to DSD on a monthly basis, and the social workers will then go and... Yes, the top-up grant. Yeah. Pleasure. So the child support top-up grant list then comes from SASSA, and we then comes to our coordinator in DSD, and that gets filtered down to the regions, and our social workers will then go and assess if these children are children that could be possibly in need of care and protection. If not, then the grant will just proceed. The top-up grant will then proceed. The gap that has been identified for the children who are not in need of care and protection, but are in families who are relatively able to manage the care of those children, will then not qualify for this grant because there's a threshold. There's a means test. And this means test means if they are above that threshold, then they will not qualify. So although that child is an orphan, they or in a child-headed household, at the head of a child-headed household, they will not qualify for the child support top-up grant. We have raised this as a gap to our National Department of Social Development, and the gap has been identified as well by our national DSD. Then the extension of the jurisdiction of guardianship applications. So DSD will be or are liaising in the process of liaising with the Department of Justice with these applications. So these applicants do not have to go to the High Court any longer. So that jurisdiction has been given to our children's courts. So this is another aspect or door in terms of a legal solution that has been open to our carers who are able to provide the care, but they just want the legal protection of that child, and then can make such a guardianship application to our children's court. Social workers will have to be trained further just in terms of the guardianship application framework. That will just tie in with their assessment skills to assess such applications. Also, with regards to the development and conducting of quality assurance processes for the evaluation of child protection services and the child protection organizations, our provincial M&E team is already in place and have been for many years, where we monitor our designated child protection organizations in terms of rendering child protection services. And for own services, we have our canalization units in place who are responsible then for the quality assurance of foster care processes. We will then also consider the expansion of our canalization units to also accommodate the initial child protection processes also in our canalization services. But the systems are there and the structure is there. So with the amendment is just about the expanding our canalization units to accommodate the frontline work as well. In terms of prescribing powers, duties and responsibilities of the registrar of the National Child Protection Register speaks to the delegation of Section 125 is already fully implemented in the Western Cape, where we screen the suitability of applicants requesting to care for children in the alternative care system, making sure that those applicants are suitable to care and that their names do not appear on Part B of the National Child Protection Register. So this process has really assisted the province to really just expedite processes, getting children into the courts faster, because previously we had to wait on Form 30s to come from National DSD, waiting for lengthy periods of time, up to 6 months, a year, for these Form 30s to come back, holding processes back within the court, as well as the extension of foster care orders. So the delegation of Section 125 has really expedited the children's court processes very much readily. The establishment of a well-resourced child protection units, the province is resourced. We have child protection units in place. And in comparison to other provinces, I think a lot of other provinces are still setting up their child protection units, as well as the model for foster care is specialized in the Western Cape. And so we're all geared in that respect. It is just our human capacity to manage the amount of child protection cases, as well as the extension of foster care orders on a monthly, weekly, annual basis. Our foster care database has grown significantly over the last 2 years. In terms of the interim court orders, with the amendments of the Children's Act, our Children's Court also now have the mandate. They also have that jurisdiction to actually extend a lapse order and provide us with an interim order, just so that social workers don't have lapse orders and that children are legally protected. In terms of the next one is providing regulations regarding procedures, the form, the manner, as well as the manner in which our social service practitioners must follow when they assess, they screen, investigate, refer the relevant to a relevant authority, placing a child who is in need of care and protection. There is a certain process that social workers must follow, and we have those regulations, we have those processes in place. We are currently busy with a manual that also will just further tie this nicely together. The last one is our cluster foster care schemes. We are also ahead in this regard. We have our cluster foster care schemes in the province. All of them are registered, and HOD signs off their certificates annually, but for the last round, we've given them a longer extension like the other NPOs. We've extended their certificates for 3 years. The courts are very happy about this, as it doesn't hold the courts back when they want to grant an order for 2 years or longer. So this has really assisted us also in that respect. As a province, we also have a cluster foster care management plan in place. Cluster foster care schemes, although they have a registration certificate of 2-3 years, but we annually go and monitor them along with the provincial M&E team to ensure compliance and that our children are well cared for and protected within the schemes. The assessment reports are then signed off by the provincial office, and if there are any areas where we feel our clusters can improve, then we put a service delivery plan in place to ensure by the following year that those gaps are closed in terms of service delivery. In terms of the number of children per scheme, we adhere to that norm and the standard within our schemes. Our children, there can only be a maximum of 6 children, up to 7 if the court finds it fit, or if a group is placed and we don't want to split our children. Norms and standards for cluster foster care are implemented and adhered to in terms of the number of our children. And we vet and we screen our carers as well, not the scheme itself, but that is done either by an external organization, be it DSD or the DCPOs within that area of operation, to avoid conflict of interest by the scheme. The Western Cape DSD also highly promotes the implementation of Section 186 of the amendments of the Children's Act, and this will definitely increase the monitoring, because previously we had to monitor like once every 2 years. Now it's annually. So we highly promote this because it will increase the monitoring to once a year, but at the same time via our regional and provincial engagements, we ensure that it will really decrease the extension of foster care orders basically every 2 years. So that is a real bonus if our courts now will see this in favor of the department, because our province were previously very reluctant to issue these long-term orders. But now with the increased amount of monitoring, hopefully our courts will now promote. And social workers have already indicated that there has been an increase in our 186s. So that is really positive for us in terms of the administrative demand to actually extend orders every 2 years. Moving over to the baseline of children in foster care, is that currently we have 39,363 children in foster care in the Western Cape. 26,478 children are children on short-term orders, which means that those children must go back to court. Those matters must go back to court every 2 years for a review. Hence, we are saying that the administrative demand in the Western Cape is very high because most of our children are on short-term orders. But hopefully we surmise that with the 186 that will improve for us, and the numbers will over time decrease. In terms of our long-term orders, it's half of that, basically 50, little bit, less than 50%. 10,515 children are on long-term orders, and 302 children are in cluster foster care schemes, and 2,370 children are children beyond the age of 18. So 70%, as we say it there, is basically our children who are on short-term orders, hence that we are required to take to court every 2 years. And we really hope that the courts are going to support us in this regard from here on in, so that we are able to see, and social workers will be able to feel the difference, because social workers are under a lot of pressure because a lot of work goes into extending one order it is the amount of work, investigation, compilation of reports and supporting documentation is almost equivalent to that of a children's court inquiry. So it is a huge administrative process to extend one foster care order. In the Western Cape, we have a specialized model. So we have specialized teams that are dedicated to foster care, rendering foster care services. And at the moment, we have 245 social workers managing 39,363 foster children in the Western Cape. Hence, that is, it's a big caseload if we do the calculation in terms of the number of cases social workers have to manage in the foster care teams. So, in addition, the constant influx of new foster care cases places an enormous strain on the human resources of the Western Cape DSD, making it very difficult for DSD to meet the ever-increasing demand of foster care services in the province. And that does not just apply to foster care, but also child protection services in the Western Cape. Then I have also included a table. The table gives a nice breakdown of what I've just highlighted. But just to give a further breakdown in terms of the human resources is that we have 433 social workers doing generic work, but also foster care. But we have our specialized foster care teams of 245 social workers. We have 106 social work supervisors. We have canalization officers, which is 32, and we have 264 social auxiliary workers, all involved in foster care management. Then the foster care web-based tool, that is our information management system in the Western Cape DSD, where we record all our children who are in foster care. And this tool is fully implemented in the Western Cape. And we have loaded all our children. So all 39,000 children are on the system. And this system provides us, it actually serves the purpose. It tells social work supervisors and social workers, managers, when orders are due to lapse and when orders have already lapsed. So managers, supervisors, and canalization officers in the regions, they use the tool to really assist them to prioritize which cases they need to extend timeously to ensure that it does not go into a backlog. So canalization officers also sends reminders to our supervisors, so they work hand in hand with the supervisors in the regions to remind them about cases that are due to lapse. Section 125, that is also that I've spoken to earlier, that is also fully implemented. In terms of our challenges, one of our very core challenges in the Western Cape is that we have is with the Department of Justice. And we acknowledge that our department, our sister department, also have challenges that are unique to them. But this is the very core challenges that we experience in terms of the foster care management processes. Magistrates vary in their interpretation and their application of the Children's Act. And hence this results in court orders, you know, where courts have different requirements. So social workers in different regions have to adhere to different requirements. And sometimes the lack of uniformity amongst these magistrates in the Department of Justice can hinder the extension of orders, because social workers will go back to court, then they get a different magistrate, and the magistrate said, no, I don't want that, I want this. No, I don't want a Form 39, I don't want a Form 30, I want a police clearance. And so our social workers are on a back, you know, on a back footing, where they have to then leave the court and go and apply for or ask the carer, who are implicated then if it's, you know, if they don't have the funds to apply for such a police clearance. So those are the different requirements. That is just a brief example I've mentioned. Then also the rotation of magistrates and vacant magistrate posts. that also impacts the staff turnaround, the language barriers where we have to get interpreters. Those are all aspects that creates postponements for foster care extensions, impacting the flow of orders being issued timeously. So the resolution of these matters will really minimize postponements and will assist us to timeously expedite foster care orders in the courts. Sometimes also our courts orders are unclear because they're written with carbon. They are unclear, incorrect. Maybe, you know, ID numbers are incorrectly captured, or surnames are or there's just a name. So they are flawed orders, in fact. So when we get these flawed orders, sometimes they're very time consuming to vary these flawed orders. And these impacts, again, not the court process, but it affects the SASSA process, because then SASSA rejects these flawed orders and refuses to actually process these flawed orders to allow these names to come off the SASSA list. Social workers also, with regards to, they have to file, when they file their reports, sometimes have to wait long periods to get the court date or court order, the court order from the court. So that is also an aspect that impacts the foster care backlog in the Western Cape. The Department of Home Affairs, this is a very challenging one. We have a long waiting list of children that requires birth certificates, and we have to adhere to the late birth registration process, which also requires an assessment of where social workers have to go and investigate and compile a report and present the matter to a panel by the Department of Home Affairs in order for children to obtain a birth certificate. We have recently made a breakthrough where we managed to work with the Department of Home Affairs, where we may submit the list to them. They review the list. We also have now just started a quarterly engagement where we will meet quarterly to review the list as well as to address challenges at any particular Department of Home Affairs office when it comes to the late birth registration process. The next challenge is also interprovincial transfers. This is a huge challenge because families move, they're very mobile, and rightly so. Then we find ourselves where we have children, foster children in the Western Cape undocumented because they move between provinces and without informing their social worker. And this results into undocumented transfers, and the end of that, or the repercussion of that process, is that social workers in DSD and DCPOs then have to adopt those cases, render services, and also often have to open new children's court inquiries to safeguard and protect those affected children. But those cases then become part of our workload and ultimately contributes to the foster care backlog. SASSA's legislation allows carers to move freely, and hence it's a very difficult process. But SASSA's actually stepped in now, and they are assisting us to with a stop payment process, which means that if a carer has been on the list, on the SASSA list, and they've moved to other province, and the provincial office manages those provincial transfers, and we can evidence that, yes, that we have transferred that case to another province, SASSA now takes them and put them through a 3-month, 6-month process where they will send them reminders, and if they don't respond within a 3-month period and they don't report to a, the grant will be stopped. If they don't report with all these reminders, they don't report to a SASSA local office, then the grant will then automatically lapse, but will be reinstated if the person submits themselves and the documentation and present the child to the SASSA local office in that particular province where they do find themselves. Further challenges is the high turnover of staff in designated child protection organizations. Despite us then giving additional funding to the identified DCPOs to support them in rendering services to children and families, Violence and hijacking of social workers / DSD vehicles in certain hotspot areas is very much a reality. Our social workers often have to lay haze with SAPs as mitigating factors to protect our social workers, as well as liaising with our community leaders to assess when it is safe for our social workers to go into to deliver services. There's also a high caseload, like I've mentioned earlier. When I did the math, it's about approximately 160 cases per social worker in the foster care services, in the foster care teams where they have to manage this. The national norm is about 60. So our social workers are managing 160 cases per social worker. And that is a lot to manage considering the statutory demand that it requires within the court processes to extend a foster care order. So when we look at our database of 39,363 children is what we currently manage, with the 245 social workers each having 160 cases. Clients fail to inform social workers. It's a challenge. It remains a challenge because clients are mobile, and sometimes our social workers spend a lot of time trying to locate families. And SASSA has also stepped in, and they are trying to assist us with an untraceable process. So we report them to SASSA when we can't find, and SASSA sometimes find families, because when SASSA say, "Oh, I think your grant will be stopped," we get a reaction. So that works sometimes, not all the time. But families can, especially within informal settlements, families are even more mobile, and often creates a situation where our social workers have to go and search for families. Sometimes we find them, sometimes we really don't find them. We have 32 of those cases which SASSA has assisted us with at the moment. In terms of designated child protection organizations and funding, we have 120 DCPOs and who are funded and we have transfer payment agreements with, and that complies with the funding process. I've just also given a breakdown of the funded posts. We in the DCPO sector only is the 6 social work managers that we fund. We fund 69 social work supervisors, 495 social workers, 240 social auxiliary workers, 35 community development assistants, admin workers, 107, which gives us a total of 952 social service professionals that the Department of Social Development funds, with a budget allocation of 199 million. In conclusion, the Western Cape DSD acknowledges the fact that we require to be consistently collaborating between the relevant role players. That is vital for the continued reduction of the foster care backlog, but also for the management of foster care in the Western Cape. The amendments of the Children's Act 38 of 2005 will provide some comprehensive legal solutions to the management of foster care, in that the number of children entering the foster care system will reduce with over a period of time, and then also hopefully reduce the risk of the foster care backlog in the Western Cape. But as DSD, we remain committed to our provincial foster care plan, and we will continue to implement the amendments of the Children's Act, appealing to all our stakeholders to support, and our key government departments to support the Western Cape DSD to manage foster care in the Western Cape. Thank you, colleagues. That concludes my presentation, honourable members. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Lip. A coffee or a tea? I see you have some water or a cool drink. What else? That was now a mouthful.
Thank you. Yes, it was a mouthful. Thank you.
Look, it is good to listen and to know what's going on. and to know what's at stake. It's a massive report looking at all the issues you're facing, that society are facing, and for us to know about it. Going around and to hear all the stories, and sometimes you don't know how things fit into one another, and one tends just to criticize many at times. But if you are filled in like today, you begin to get the necessary respect for what our social work department is going through and what they need to do. A number of questions, but let me get to the members first. Honourable Baku Vos is still online. Or anyone else in the room?
Yes, sir.
Baku, my friend, you may go.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, my first question will be in slide 3. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, Honourable Member, you may go. We listen.
Thank you, Chairperson. My first question is on slide 3. I would like to know what and foster care backlog. And on slide 9, with regards to the Western Cape learners unplaced crisis in schools, are there any children in foster care that have not been placed in schools? That's my third question is on slide 14. What is the race or the age and gender of children in foster care? If the department can provide us with that information. And it's on slide 17, with regard to the first challenge, a good relationship between the two departments should be commended. But Chairperson, I want to know how many children are affected by these delays in issuing birth certificates, and what is the number of the so-called undocumented interprovincial foster care transfers? And my last question, Chairperson, is on slide 18. With regard to information shared on slide 18, a lot has been said without giving sufficient details. I therefore wish to understand the following. What causes the high turnover in the child protection organizations, and what other interventions have been made besides additional funding, and what is the purpose of the additional funding? Has the department engaged sister departments of police oversight and community safety for deployed off-leap officers and neighborhood watches in the hotspot areas? With regards to the high foster care caseload, how many additional social workers are needed to manage the caseload? And what is the estimated cost to recruit them? Thank you, Chairperson. Before I sit, can I give the last question, which is slide 19? And with regards to the list of funded posts, first, are the posts enough to deal with the high demand? Secondly, are all the posts filled? If not, what is the vacancy rate? And lastly, Chairperson, what is the attrition rate for this program? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I think it's such an awful lot of comments and questions and remarks. Let's focus on those first before I go to the next person. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Honourable Member, your last question, I think that was on page 19. If I'm not mistaken, you were focusing on the funded posts. Am I right?
Yes, Chairperson.
You got that. Okay, thank you, Member. Dr. McDonald, you may You and your team may answer.
Thank you, Chairperson. Do you guys want to go ahead with responses to the extent that you are comfortable? Is there anything that you need me to respond to?
Let's start and see what we can answer, and then, yeah.
Okay.
Can you explain the number?
We'll just quickly go to the report to give the exact figure.
Yeah, I can just maybe in the meantime, while Naja's quickly just verifying that amount because we've got it here. Also, with the Department of Home Affairs, we've got over 250 cases of children that we don't have birth certificates that we're trying to get from Home Affairs. So that was the one question that Honourable Member asked. As Mr. Leap has indicated, we've got now a quarterly meeting. It took us 10 years to get this quarterly meeting with Home Affairs Department.
Yeah.
It's been horrendous. But luckily we found...
So many years.
Yeah.
No, it can't be.
So, yeah, they wouldn't respond to us in general. They didn't respond to us. We got the HOD involved at one stage to write letters to them. So it's been horrific. You would get maybe here and there in a Home Office in an area that would assist you, but on a provincial level, they just didn't engage us on all our letters.
Now, how does that then influence the placement of the unregistered children, if I can put it to you like that?
Yeah.
Any influence? You still place them anyway, regardless their paperwork that's not in order?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can still place them, but it's then the issue of the SASSA grant.
That's right.
Because SASSA don't pay out grants without that birth certificate. Or the court would insist on having that birth certificate to say that the child will get an order. So that is issues. Yeah. So there's 250 children. I think I have that number reduced now. We're still there.
It's in the region.
Yeah, still in the
of
region.
that.
So that is still an issue, but we've got no engagements. We've identified an individual that actually responds to us and help us to send this information to all the Home Affairs local offices in the Western Cape Province. What we've done even so far, we sit in national meetings where there's national counterparts from the sister department sitting, like Home Affairs and Department of Justice. So we constantly raise these issues. Probably for the past 5 years, we've been raising these issues with our national counterparts. But we are very thankful since last year, it happened that one individual then listened to us. And we've got now we're building a relationship with this individual. So unfortunately, it's got to be based on an individual that you now know. That actually assists us now to give it to the local offices of Home Affairs to assist us with this matters. Yeah. Najwa, I think gender and age of children.
That is a bit difficult to to ascertain because the synopsis that we have in this report, but on our foster care system, we are able to access that data, the age of the child, and the gender of the child. That type of intel is on the foster care monitoring tool system. So we can actually provide that information, but not in today's meeting.
Yeah, we will have to go into the system to draw a report of the 59,000. But in general, the children are from easily 3 months up till 21. If you look at that range, that will be the children.
Yeah.
But if we want to have the exact numbers, we can draw a report from the system of all 39,000 children.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And like we said, CD, that we have about 2,100 children who are over the age of 18. So the other 30-odd thousand, 37,000 are children between 0 to 18. But to be giving the specific ages, we will have to go into the system for that. In terms of our backlog, the current backlog, which is up until February, because then March is not counted as backlog, is 1,789. And then the one that will form part of the backlog this month is the 459. So it's in the region of just over 2,000.
I just want to add what Najwa was saying there. I think there's always a perception that we've got a foster care backlog and that's permanent. It's not permanent. We're constantly getting new cases coming into the system. So our numbers actually fluctuate every single month, where you would have cases going into backlog because of issues with the court, giving us incorrect court orders not folding correctly. Or we've even picked up with some of the courts, they would have a court hearing, And then a month later after that, then we only get the court order from the court. We don't get the court orders on the same day that the social worker was in court. So that creates some of your backlogs. But the past 6 months, plus minus 3,000 children came into the system. So the system is heavily overloaded. There is definitely a shift within the community. Definitely more issues in the community with regards to keeping children safe. Hence the fact that we've got 3,000 cases additionally this past 6 months of children that went into the foster care system. So it's various concerns. And part of these concerns additionally from my side is that the department offer various parenting programs just to try and alleviate the issue of parents being in conflict with their children or vice versa. We also have various kinds of awareness and intervention work, early intervention work, to ensure that parents do take care of their children properly. But still saying all of that, we've really got a lot of children that's coming into the system at a rate. With regards to social workers that it's not been retained, if I look at another concerning factor for us is our child protection organizations, the 120 that we fund. Now, they deal also with a great deal of foster care matters. Now, if I just look at one organization, Badisa, they had a turnover of over 178 social workers and 102 social auxiliary workers in the past 11 months. So that indicates that although social workers are being recruited, they actually choose to leave this field due to the complexity of statutory child protection services. As Najwa's indicated, a lot of people do not understand what involves in just the placement of a child. It's not a question of just moving into a house and placing a child by parents. There's court processes the whole time. It's like a normal court process. If you are being found guilty or you're in court, the court postpones the case, the court asks you to come back. Even if you look in this fraud cases and murder cases, it's constantly being referred back. The same with these cases. So the cases land up in children's court, but then it gets referred back. Or the court takes a long time to set dates for our social workers. So that's one of the reasons why the social workers get very, very burned out. Because if they go sit at the court in the morning, it's not to say their case is being prioritized if they're 8 o'clock there. Their case can only appear 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock the afternoon, which means that our social worker, might it be from an NGO or DSD, sits the whole day at the court until her or his case appears. That causes that our social workers then are out of the field for the day to deal with other urgent matters. But this is all things that we are aware of. This is all things that we try and engage with the magistrates. Magistrates, as Najwa's indicated, they interpret things differently. So there's no standard from magistrates how they interpret things. The one wants police certificates from the safety parent before the placement happens. Others don't worry about that because we've got access to the child protection register to tell the court, listen, this person is not on the register. But some magistrates would still want to see a police clearance certificate, which costs money. Then we need to go back to the police to get one for the safety parent or the foster parent. So this all has led to social workers resigning from the sector. The additional matter is funding of salaries. It's ferocious. It's saddening to see what the social workers earn, specifically in the NGO sector. So that's why you've got that high turnover rate, the lack of retention. And they prefer right now, we see a major or big exit of social workers going overseas, taking up jobs in Australia, England, and New Zealand. There the caseloads would be something like 15 a month, whereas you just seen, Najwa indicated that we've got 160 caseload per social worker just on foster care. That excludes all the other issues the social worker still needs to do, on child protection, on whatever kind of other issues that they've got to deal with for the day. Could be family interventions also that they've got to deal with. So that's the main things. Is there any other questions that I've maybe missed?
Just the community leaders when our social
The
workers are supposed
lead
to
officer
violate.
issue,
Oh, okay.
safety of social
Oh,
work.
the safety aspect.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Yeah, the department has got a partnership going in most precincts with SAPS, and where there are LEAP officers, also with LEAP officers, where they do request SAPS or LEAP officers to accompany them in high-risk situations, particularly after hours. This is more successful in some areas than others. In some areas, we have very good cooperation with the SAPS. In other areas, it's not so much, and it also depends on the resources SAPS has available. Sometimes they say they simply don't have enough people available to accompany the social workers. So it's quite a difficult thing. But also, I think going forward, the partnership with the LEAP and area-based teams will be another resource that we can build on. The city's Metro Police have also been supportive where they can be. But it's a very difficult thing. A similar problem to that experienced by the EMS teams that have been attacked in some red zones. Where SAPS can go, they do, but they're not always able to. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Sorry, Chair, there's two other questions. I just remember that a member, Balka Force, asked. The one is, how many additional social workers would we need if we look at the current workload of 160 and the 245 social workers we have? We at least need another 100 just to specialize in foster care to bring those workloads down. Now, if I just look at an average salary of a junior social worker in government, it's about 300,000 Rand. So you're talking about 50 million Rand if you need to do that. If it's in the NGO sector that we can recruit more people, then it will be much less. Since currently a social worker in the NGO sector only earns 16,000 Rand a month. That's without SARS deductions or pension or medical aid. So they hardly sit with any money left over. So that's the cost involved. If I look also at the additional funding that was provided, there's two things. The one is for our department to appoint more social workers. I think it's a total of 247, Robert, with ANAMI in the regions. Yeah, and that will also include the hotspot areas. Social service professionals, so social workers, social auxiliary workers, community development practitioners.
So that process started already?
That process started already. It was advertised a month ago, and I saw now last Friday some more were advertised. Quite a lot of posts were advertised already. So it's also supervisors and ordinary social workers as well. If I look at the NGO sector specifically, our budget only increased with 8 million Rand for salaries, from 191 million to 199 million, which means with 8 million Rand, I could not give the social workers salary increases because we've got over 900 of them in the sector that we currently fund. So with 8 million, I can't increase their salaries. So what we've opted to do is to rather look at the extension of some of the NGOs that have approached us and said, listen, you can't give us more salaries, just give us at least more social workers to help us, specifically in informal settlements or in the metro areas where they are totally overwhelmed and burned out with the amount of cases. So we've added quite a few posts. With that 8 million Rand, we added easily about 20 to 25 posts additionally for them. We've also even looked at some of the NGOs with supervisors. So some of the supervisors would look after 18 to 20 social workers, which is not the norm. The norm is about 1 to 7, 1 to 6. One manager to 6, 7, 8 social workers maximum. So here you've got one social worker, and if I look even at the rural areas, your supervisor would sit, for example, in Beaufort West, but they've got offices in Laingsburg, they've got offices in wherever that social work supervisor needs to travel all around the place just to supervise the social worker. Now, what does that mean if you supervise? That means that when a social worker writes a report to court, a supervisor must sign it off and double check that they've done the correct work and so forth. So yes, the NGOs get to that, but somebody, one individual, is running between regions like a mad hatter, trying to get to all the social workers that needs to appear in court. So you've got another person that burns out a bit. So what we've done, we've looked at that ratio, in the NGO sector of supervisors versus social workers, and we have provided more social work supervisor posts to alleviate the stress on some of the supervisors in the NGO sector. So fortunately with that 8 million rand, we could do that. And then also part of that 8 million rand, we've provided 50 admin posts because we've done a full analysis and we've seen that the social workers in the NGO sector, and in DSD, but predominantly in the NGO sector, they don't have admin staff to help with all the admin work. So when they finish in a court, they've got to come home at night and start filling in paperwork. Might it be whatever they have to do. So we've given 50, we're funding 50 admin officers in this new financial year, which would assist the social workers in the NGO sector with administrative work. Might it be filing stuff for them? Might it be phoning around for them to get appointments? Might it be whatever they need administratively for that kind of support? So from DSD side, we've really tried to see how we can assist them as far as possible.
Thank you. Could
Thanks.
I quickly get to, I believe, Honourable Member Rachel Wildvogel is also now with us. Welcome, Member. Any question from your side? Just a second. No, Wildvogel is not responding.
Chairperson,
Yeah.
she sent a message. She can't hear anything. I sent the message through to Nomonde.
Okay, thank you
Her
very much.
hand was up.
We note that. Honourable Gideon, please.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, I'd like to know what happens when an organization or an orphanage is deregistered? What monitoring protocols are in place? I'm not sure if you all remember in 2019, there was the case of the Al Noor children's facility in Woodstock that was closed where 17 children were removed. And then there were reports again in 2021 of DSD having gone back to that facility because they were deregistered and closed down, but they were somehow still operating. I was wanting to find out sort of what processes are in place once DSD has finalized its deregistration process. Do you still monitor facilities, and are people placed on a list where you watch whether sort of they've reoffended? And then also, what was the outcomes of the Al Noor inquiry? Because the 17 children were removed and placed into alternative places of safety, but there were serious charges leveled against the operators of the orphanage. And I think to this day, sort of that facility is still being used. I just wanted to understand sort of what happens in that situation.
Okay.
I can also? Yeah, but you can add if you leave out something. Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, Honourable Member, with that case specifically, I was very much involved with that case personally. Yeah, very sad things. I still clearly remember that that property belongs to the City of Cape Town. We've requested the City of Cape Town to do an eviction of those people from those premises. They have sent an eviction notice, but never followed it up. So with the City of Cape Town, we had issues. That led to the fact, you are quite correct. Then the next year, when we went to go and, so they've been deregistered, we never registered them. Actually, we never registered them since 2010. Their deregistration at one stage was a conditional one, and then it lapsed, and we did not re-register them. So when they were caught out in 2019, they were unregistered, operating illegally. Saying that, we did about 3 follow-ups after that within a question of a year and a half. So part of your deregistration process would be that you would do follow-ups to go and check, send out a social worker just to go check, is that place still operating, is it not? Then when we, for the second time, then we found children again there. Those children did not live there. They were only there for a holiday program, according to their parents. I mean, all the parents live in Langa, Gugulethu, Galicha. We took those children back. The parents confirmed it was a holiday program. The children were not living there permanently. Right now, as we said, as far as I know, and we've done, I think, was just with the end of COVID, well, end of COVID, end of the regulations, the emergency regulations, we have not detected that there's any children all by themselves. The children that's there lives within a family unit. Their parents are with them. Honourable Member, on the case of the operators, the last time I heard that the case was dropped against the operators because the NPA's case was not strong enough and the state's case was not strong enough, which I found personally very worrying because I've seen all the documents, I've seen everything myself, but I'm not an investigator. And according to my own belief, there would have been enough evidence to actually prosecute the people and deport him. Because the lady specifically is not, she wasn't South African, but it was false ID books and who knows what else. But what I would want to do is, I was actually thinking about the same case about a month ago in my own head. And I just want to actually find out by the NPA myself if they've actually continued the story. But the last I heard from them, they decided not to prosecute, or they didn't have enough. Yeah. So we will just follow up and just see what's happened to that case. Thanks.
Maybe to add, thank you very much. The culprits actually fled the country in that particular instance, or at least the chief culprits in any event. But they did afterwards then.
I feel with your message.
Yeah, we're not prosecuting the matter, but the facility then ended up being used as a activity space on and off for youth who were coming in on a non-residential basis. So it's at this point, I don't know what's going on in that place, but we, as Mr. Jordan has said, we've been keeping an eye on it to make sure they haven't re-established a child and youth care centre illegally. But in general, if we get a court order to close a place, then we monitor it, and if they try to resume, then we can press charges for contempt if there's an order in place. If we instruct a place to close and they don't close, what we would normally do is remove the children and instruct them to close. And if they continue to operate, we would then have to seek a court order to enforce the closure. So that's the normal procedure with closures.
Honourable Gillian, you happy with that answer? Sure, but that is coming along for such a long time, and no end in sight to that one. It is Interpol, it is the Guptas. What next? Honourable Christopher Fry.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to be very long at all. I just want to firstly commend the department for their work, especially with the amendment to the Children's Amendment Bill, especially through clauses 8 through 12 that dealt with the cluster foster care issue. So thank you so much for your help. I just have one question regarding the challenges. You said that if people move house, what happens when they change cell phones? Because that must also be a very difficult thing.
Honourable Member, that is another challenge when they move, and they often change cell phone numbers. Yeah.
Now, tell me about it with community members. Every month it's a different cell number and they don't inform you about it.
Yeah, and that's, Honourable Chair and Member, why I refer to its heavy loads for the social worker. Because that social worker needs now to start contacting everybody to find out what's this new number of this person. Do you know where? So we go to the neighbours, we go to family members we might have on record. So that social worker must go up and down the whole day just to find one number. You know.
Mrs. Sumaya, page 14, your table 5. I need to clear my mind with regard to the figures. Tell me when you're there. You got it? Look, I'm not sure. Looking at Cape Winelands, that figure of 4319, is that actual children figure for that area? Yes. The same with Eden Karoo. Yep. And the same with the West Coast.
That's great.
That is particularly very, very high for those areas. What do you think are the contributing factors to that those figures are so high, specifically for those 3 areas? Is it just generalized neglect from parents or no parents, or are there other reasons we're not aware of?
You can add now, Joel. Honourable Chairperson, I think it's got to do with our societal issues going on in this country right now. The thing of people that do not have jobs, unemployment in other words. It's also got to do with things such as substance abuse, alcohol, which is also a major contributing factor. If you go into your rural areas, a lot of them are, especially Cape Highlands, you would find seasonal workers that works on farms, because that is predominantly a farm area. Cape Highlands, Stellenbosch, right through to Ceres, Worcester, everything, Wellington. So you would have people that would have an income certain periods of a year, but not the rest, which means sometimes also high levels of alcohol intake, which leads to child abuse. So it has got to do with our socioeconomic environment.
So poverty, unemployment is a major contributing factor.
Absolutely, yeah.
Sure. And are there engagements in those areas with the localized structures, such as NGOs, such as the religious sector, such as the municipalities? Are they aware of these high rates of child neglect and foster care problems in their region?
The NGOs definitely, Chairperson. So obviously we engage with our NGOs, we engage, our own officers engage with the communities and so forth. I think, in my mind, the municipalities not. I don't think the municipalities are aware of it because municipalities are not involved with childcare protection services. It's not one of their core functions. So somewhere along the way, I think what a person should engage is actually with stakeholder engagements to actually inform your municipalities and say to them, listen, are you aware of how your community goes through child abuse, the numbers? They're definitely not aware of the numbers.
Because if I'm looking at these numbers versus the numbers in the metro, Metro North, Metro South, it's much higher.
Yeah.
Or there's a lack of reporting in the metro. It is happening under our eyes, many of the child neglect issues we might not be aware of. And the reporting factor for those Karoo and other areas is much higher, maybe.
Yeah, in the metros, it could be a combination of things. It would be the one thing also that cases are not reported. You're quite correct about that. So if a child is in need of care and protection, we don't know that ourselves what's going on in the house until a neighbor reports it to us or a community member. So if a neighbor or family member, community member do not report to us, we can't intervene. So I would think that that would be one aspect of underreporting. Secondly, also, a thing that I've picked up, a lot of people, when the parents die, or one of the parents die, or the mother's in trouble, in the metros predominantly, the child goes to the family, informally. So they don't go through the court process, the child don't get officially placed in foster care. Child goes and stay by Oma, or the child goes to stay by the sister of the mother, and they start taking care of it in an informal matter. So it's an informal arrangement. That's the one big thing in the metros, informal arrangements. Also, a lot of people don't want the world to know that my grandchild's mother is an alcoholic. Let's just keep quiet about this and I'll just take care of the child in the meantime. Because a lot of children also grow up by their grandparents, which does not need to go or necessarily go through the court.
So there's an extended family involvement and structure.
So that's probably why these numbers look like this. In your rural areas, you don't often have extended families because of geographic areas, because of a lot of family not living there, that all migrated to the metros anyway because looking for job opportunities. So that would be one of the reasons why this numbers look like
your 3,600 additional children admitted. The breakdown between metro and outlying areas, Mr. Stellit? Your 3,600 figure you mentioned as additional children coming into the foster care system.
Yes.
Breakdown mainly platteland, outlying areas, or jointly platteland and metro?
It's a mixture.
It's a mixture.
Yeah.
No. Okay. Look, just one or two other issues from my side. The role of SASSA with regard to the foster care payments. With all SASSA's current problems, do you experience any particular problems with the payment of grants?
Funny enough, Chair, that's the one thing, because I know our minister's busy with a whole process with SASSA on other issues. No, that's the interesting part. We do not have major issues with SASSA when it comes to this. So they do pay out the foster care grants quite effectively when it comes to children. Our issue is the courts. So the longer the court takes to get a court order, or they give us incorrect court orders with wrong names and ID numbers, then only we have an issue, but it's not SASSA's fault because they are dependent on what we give them.
Yeah.
But in general, when it comes to child care services, we do not have an issue with SASSA.
Yeah.
We don't.
And then with regard to Home Affairs and their role, with all the complaints you do have about Home Affairs, do you think it will be appropriate for us if you provide us with a list of issues and we can ask Home Affairs to come and answer to those issues down here?
That would be great.
That would be great.
That would be great.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I note the salary issues. I think Bakufos asked a couple of questions down there as well. I note the lack of retention of social workers is actually very scary, but I'm glad we're going to bring over 200 social workers into the system. And that might alleviate our plight with regard to social work issues. I'm not sure if there's any more questions, members. Let me just check my list again. Honorable Baku, you may go. Yes. Van Vogel, please. Good morning, and you may ask your questions.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is, I only have one question. It's actually a clarity. It's actually, it's shocking the high number in negligence in terms of the foster care issue. I just want to check, do the department have a program where they, especially in the local of the rural areas, where they inform the community? Do they have a program in place in rural areas? Because it's really shocking, because we need the community to get involved. If that's the problem, that as a community, that's what we are facing. We can't do, as government, we can't do it alone. So I just want to know, do they have something in place where they inform the community, a program in place?
Thank you, Honourable Member. Yeah, we've got various programs. So, for example, now with Child Protection Week coming up, we've got a list of easily 60, 70 kind of events that our NGOs are doing. So it's all part of awareness raising at the communities. There's marches, there's meetings that they actually do awareness on. There's also going to be a lot of stuff on media throughout the Western Cape province. So the department's got a whole program with raising awareness with regards to child protection specifically in general, not on foster care per se, but on child protection in general, which foster care is one aspect of it. So yes, there's every year we do these kinds of programs in Child Protection Week, but then also our NGOs and our own organizations, they would embark on processes throughout the year with doing awareness. That's also why we have a lot of parenting programs that we offer. So if we pick up that a family is struggling with a child and have issues with parental responsibility, we would actually then offer parenting programs as well. And we've got high numbers. Even if I just look at the statistics from the family program side, it's 20,000 almost. Yeah. So with our families, we've also got interventions throughout the province, metros, rural areas, everything, where we reach a target of over 20,000 families per year. And it's in our APP, where we actually look at doing preventative and intervention work with families to support them and so forth. Since the families actually the most important issue. They are the core unit for the protection of that child, plus also for an older person or a disabled person living in that family. So it is very, very important for us to do family preservation. So it's quite big numbers that we do throughout the province on reaching families. Then we've also got various organizations that assist us with just family support. So for example, like your FAMSAs, you get them in the metros and in the rural areas where they look at family support, family counseling, looking at the whole unit of the family, not only an individual. So yeah, there's various programs. That's just but a few I've mentioned now. Thanks.
Thanks for that question, Honourable Rachel. Very important one. Yeah, I want to round off, if there's no further questions, but I think I want to round off with this one. The amount of children in foster care is a major issue. But I think what we did not touch on is the children, and that is in the health APPs, the health report, annual report, the amount of children death under the age of 5 to 10 years, hundreds and hundreds of them. And you can link it clearly to the social fabric, to the social issues. So it's very heartening to hear that there's a couple of programs underway, FAMSA and NGOs and that sort of thing. And as members, we need to begin to support those programs. We can't want to leave it to the department alone and to the staff alone and to the social workers alone and that sort of thing. I think, Dr. McDonald, to you and your team, where you need us to support just with our presence, even if we say nothing. We don't need to say anything and that sort of thing, but just the moral support of figures to be there and to be present. We need to begin to touch on these matters in a more kind of a comprehensive manner and give you that necessary support. Because it is scary figures, and we can't, as politicians, we can't let it lie and die down, and it's happening, so that is it. It's a by-the-way kind of an issue. And I want to stress that for all the members to hear, for all the political parties to hear, if there is one thing we need to do as a collective, we can't want to play politics around these issues, definitely not. The party political affiliation of any of these families must not be at stake. It must be the children, it must be the situation that is important for us. Thank you very much for being here, Honourable HOD, you and your staff. We really appreciate that. And the members online, Wim Vogel and Honourable Rachel, actually Baku Vos, thank you for being part of this meeting today, and the two members in the House, Honourable Gillian and Honourable Fry, we appreciate it. Thank you and have a wonderful day. My apologies for being a bit hastig. I warned you before. It's a full program for me. I must still go to Paul for another event, for another program. And there's refreshments in the House. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson and Honourable Members.
We are done. Thank you. I can't believe the figures.
We are not done. We must still do resolution.
No, it's fine. Yeah, we will.
Don't be in
The members online, just stay online for 2-3 minutes, please, for the resolutions. No, I must say to you, it's very scary figures.
Yeah.
Whew, I can't believe it.
But
No, just 2 minutes, 2 minutes. We got our recommendations already in place.
no,
No, Gillian, let's finish it and then we know it's done. Then we don't.
going to take now the members emailing because they don't email. And
Okay, with regard to.
and now it's our APP we are doing.
Yes, I'm here.
But what I'm saying is,
Give me a minute, honourable members. I'm with you right now.
it's part of what now we are audited on, the resolutions. So for meetings now, we must make sure that we get the resolutions, because now the dates. Okay,
Gillian.
I thought, how can I, from our side, we were told that.
But they got pressure on their shoulders. We must realize that.
Because we want to control members, we are doing it because. And sometimes the committee will say they are going to email, but they don't email.
How are you?
Good on yourself. Good on yourself.
And the meetings sometimes don't have resolution.
Sit 2 minutes, don't put off. Sit, yeah, stand 2 minutes, we're done now. Okay, guys, I want to get to the resolutions quickly. I see you down in the dining section for a cup of tea. Thank you, Robert. Dr. McDonald. I think Christopher is going with me to Paul, eh? Okay. Oh, you said so the other day. You are not going. Okay, let's someone. But look, education had a couple of very good oversight visits the last couple of weeks. Not bad. It is a lot, but it's keeping us busy. I understand them. Okay, resolutions. Any resolutions from the member side? One from my side is we need to find a way to engage the municipalities concerned with regard to these high socialized figures in their areas. Listening to the personnel, to the department officials, there is not real engagement with the municipalities regarding these figures. I think the mayors and the executive members of municipalities needs to become aware. We need to find a way of how best we can bring these figures under their attention, even if we need to conduct our own meeting with NGOs, CBOs in the areas, but I will have to engage Minister Fernandez, because the thing is I don't want to overstep boundaries and that sort of thing on her level. But we need to ask the minister what is her line of thinking with regard to such a move. I don't think. Yeah, Honorable Baku, you may go.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think you are in the right path, Chairperson, on that one. And the second resolution I'm thinking of, Chairperson, listening to the presenters today, it worries me because I know, as I'm a former community worker, the social workers are facing a lot of challenges. Remember, the community doesn't know, if you are not in the office, what is the reason for you not to be in the office the whole day. Yeah, sitting of the social workers in the court for the whole day, I don't think it's a right thing. I don't know how can we tackle that, because at least I think they were supposed to do appointments for the social workers so that they can go and do their other works that they need to do for that day. Yeah. And the second one, Chairperson, it's about the police involvement. I mean the what do you call this?
The LEAP officers' involvement.
No, not LEAP officers. Where you get your certificate or ID.
Oh, Home Affairs.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. The Home Affairs, the Home Affairs, or the Department of Social Development, #SASA, are making difficult sometimes because of the for the parents, because of the challenges that parents are facing. Sometimes the child was not registered by her mom in hospital to get a certificate when she was born, or you was born. And then now the new parents or the foster parents need the certificate, birth certificate, but in the Department of Home Affairs, they cannot get that. I don't know how they can do it, but the process is very difficult. That's why some of the parents ended up not getting foster funding or foster payment because of the challenge of the certificates of the children. I think Home Affairs need to work very close with the department to solve that issue. But maybe if we can also do the oversight on them, or if we can, or we are allowed, we can call them in. But my understanding, I think that department belongs to the national. You can advise me. Yeah, that's my concern.
Thank you. Yeah, it's linked to my recommendation about Home Affairs as well. I think it's appropriate for us to ask Home Affairs to come and pay us a visit and to answer to some of these issues. Thank you, Honourable Baku. Honourable Rachel, from your side, nothing? No. Doesn't seem like it. Okay, Gillian, please.
Chair, just maybe if you could write to the National Prosecuting Authority and ask what the outcome of the Al Noor orphanage criminal case was and why that case has not been brought to trial. And if we could also perhaps have DSD monitor what happens to the site where the Al Noor orphanage was. They're saying that the city was busy with eviction processes, but there doesn't seem to be anybody following up sort of what happens, because if there's 45 people living there now, sort of it's still an issue of concern, because if they operated in 2021, having children there and those children were removed, nothing stops them from doing it again.
No, I think what is at the city is Jana, work with that before, and the other one now is Patricia van der Ros.
I've asked Patricia to send a message to ask whether they know about it. So she sent an email to the PD, so we should get an email forward. I don't think the city knows about the DSD side of things.
Because we need them to know about
Yeah, the next meeting will be scheduled after the constituency period. I think you got the notice on your desk.
No, it's not in
Tuesday, 23rd of May 2023, the committee will request a briefing from SASSA on the progress made by SASSA to address the applications backlog for the social relief of the stress grant and disability grant post in the province. In addition, SASSA will brief the committee on the alleged closure of post offices for grant collection and the measures in place for the continuation of grant distribution in the province. There was a lot of questions about SASSA the last couple of weeks.
Okay, the briefing of SASSA, Chair, what is it that you want SASSA to come and do?
They must come and do
Is
just
it
that.
on that? Okay,
Yeah.
so I wanted that so the members can be on the same page.
Okay, SASSA will brief us on that.
Okay.
I will forward to you some additional questions you can put in your letter to SASSA. Because myself and Minister Shana Fernandez, we talk, and Alexandra Abrams, and what is the other lady from National's name? Bridget Masangu. Lots of talks the last couple of days about all the SASSA vows. Lots of problems. Many people did not receive their grant payments. But you see, my issue is why I don't highlight SASSA so much. I don't just want to focus on SASSA. SASSA taking up a lot of one's time. Gillian, is that all you were doing when you were the chair? No ways.
Let's help desk.
But it's the first time. I don't think SASA's taking up a lot of our time. Our people need us, and if we do have that power to engage with SASA at the national level, let's do it. It's the first meeting in your time that we have with SASA.
Thank you, Rachel, for picking up on that. Yeah, SASA is giving me a headache, but okay, we will summons them to our committee to answer to some of the issues. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Thank you, Chairperson. Have a progressive day.